Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening. This is John Harney from History Respawned, joining you this evening to talk about a game called The Curious Expedition. So, if you happen to come across me either live now or in the recorded version very quickly, you can find a lot more content like this at youtube.com/historyrespawned. I'll talk about that more at the end of the video. For those of you who do know who we are, let me give a little update first on how things are going. Bob and I have had a very busy year, which is great. Not all of it has been History Respawned, which is a pity, but that's life. We have got a couple of good episodes out the last couple of months, and we've been podcasting, and Bob in particular went to the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, and so our podcast on SoundCloud has some fantastic content from Bob speaking to people, including the man behind the Oregon Trail game, which is a very famous game, and some fantastic discussions with some very cool people. So very, very much worth your time, and I hope you'll go and consider giving it a look. So tonight, what am I doing? Well, this will be a pretty short stream, but I wanted to take a few minutes to play a little bit of the Curious Expedition and talk about the game, and specifically talk about how I am using the game in class, because, well, I am. I'm using it specifically in my global history class at Centre College where I work. We have this class. We have a number of classes you can take for your Gen Ed, and for those of you who've been out of college a while, maybe haven't gone to college yet, your Gen Ed classes are ones that you have to take to graduate. So if you have gone to college and you had to take history class, to graduate, my class is one of the classes you would have taken. So very broadly speaking, History 110, this global history class, is kind of the history of the world from the dawn of time until 1850. And rather than try and teach it that way, which would be impossible, I like to focus on themes. So we're just wrapping up now a 2-week module on discovery and exploration, and that's where the Curious Expedition came in. So people who've listened to History Respawn podcasts before or watch videos of ours might know that I have taught a class in an intensive winter term at Centre on video games. And Bob has since gone on to teach a class in a long semester, and I just wanted to bring more stuff into kind of long semester discussions. And so that's where Curious Expedition comes in. Hello, Peter Crossland, how are you? I'm saying hello to streamers, this is new. I'm used to recording stuff, so I'm getting the hang of this. So, let's get started. So in the class, I gave them a short assignment based on the Curious Expedition. And for those of you who don't know, the Curious Expedition is a very cool game by a bunch of fellas out of Germany who call themselves Maschinenmensch. Very, very nice people, and I should point out that when I mentioned on Twitter I wanted to use this game for my class, they very kindly gave me some keys for the browser version of their game so that my students wouldn't necessarily have to buy a copy of the game. I'm happy to let those developers know, if you happen to see this, that some of my students did happily buy copies of the game, so that makes me feel better. And so before we get into the meat of the game, you start off by picking a character, and there's some kind of intriguing characters here. Charles Darwin, an English naturalist and geologist, Marie Curie, who of course famous for pioneering research in radioactivity, Richard Burton, a heroic adventurer. His little buff here, you can see all of the little buffs, is that he's a polyglot, and he brings along these friends with him. He brings along a British soldier and a native scout. More of this kind of native scout carry on in just a few minutes. Johan Huizinga, who's very famous in particular for talking about play and concepts of sport. And the guy I'm going to go with tonight, Roald Amundsen, who is a character newly available with the Arctic Expedition expansion. In fact, I played this earlier, and it was Ernest Shackleton who very famously kind of traversed the Antarctic continent. Roald Amundsen famously discovered the South Pole 2 days ahead of the Englishman Robert Scott, which obviously upset Scott. So Amundsen brings with him a couple of interesting buffs here that can be used in Arctic-style conditions. He has two huskies, and again a native animal handler. So what's going on in this game? Let's just jump in and play it for a few minutes, and I can comment on what it was that drew me to the game. So the premise of the game is you're part of this explorers club, And this gentleman here is explaining to us, the building of a statue, and essentially all of this is to set up a competition between you and other figures. So I just picked Roald Amundsen, and I will now be competing against Amelia Earhart, Nikola Tesla, H.P. Lovecraft, and Ada Lovelace. This has come up in class because I asked the students one of the first things we talked about today. Today's class was wrapping up the Discovery module, and we talked about popular perceptions of explorer type characters. We looked at video clips of Indiana Jones, for example, and I asked them, why do you think this game has the disparate characters that it does? And some of the students came back and said, well, we feel there's this thematic exploration kind of idea that's there, but also kind of more broadly, they're all from roughly the 19th century or so, kind of creeping into the 20th century. And I pointed out that kind of evokes this kind of vibe here with this drawing room that we'll come back to in just a bit. I'm going to pick Tourist Trip because I'm really bad at this game. It's kind of a roguelike type game. It's not necessarily supposed to be easy or straightforward, and my experience of talking while I play means that I won't play particularly well anyway. So here we can see that H.P. Lovecraft is out in the strange drylands, and we have the dark drylands and all these places. We're going to go ahead to the Wahomey jungle, and we're going to start our expedition. All starts off here with our ship and our supplies. And this often happens, particularly in your first mission. Somebody approaches you and says, I want to go with you to this place. So in this particular case, we have Sir Dare Ilimajed approaching the ship. He used to live in the area, and he's asking that I find his wife. So I say, sure thing. This is usually something that can be done pretty quickly. We'll see if that proves to be true. And we set off. And a game, assuming you get to the end of it, features a handful of these expeditions, and they all begin in this way. And this was something that, when I first considered using a game for History 110, the active map, as I'm calling it, this actively uncovering this 2D hex style map, which definitely evokes the Civilization games, but has its own kind of little thing going. I'm going to access ship storage, and I'm going to put my Arctic stuff away for a while. I might need the chocolate and the climbing gear and the shotgun, but the other stuff I don't think I'll need. So we're worried about our rivals attaining a noticeable head start, so let's begin the expedition. So your first mission, you tend to get this kind of little update here on where to go. So the wealthy foreigner indicated the location of the village where his wife is. So let's go and have a look at this. So before I get started, and I will probably die very shortly, which is just as well, it'll give me time to talk about the game. I was really intrigued by this little 2D hex type situation here, and in particular, as you're about to see, the way that the map falls away before the explorer. So particularly today, we talked a lot about exploration of the Antarctic and how it differed from, for example, exploration of the New World or perhaps of Australia and the Pacific, which are all topics we talked about in class over the last couple of weeks. And as we traverse the world here, this is where the guy's wife is. We have a question mark here. We have a mountain face sculpture, question mark, question mark, question mark here. Let's make our way slowly towards the village. So as we approach the edge of the map starts to fall away, and we're losing something up here called sanity. This is a sanity meter, and so the further away we get from home base, from the home ship, the more trouble we get in, right? Up here we have standing, which is basically how well we are getting on or not getting on with the quote-unquote with the locals. And in the top right-hand corner here, we get a little bit of an exploration point kind of mechanic for leveling people up, and beneath we have members of our team. So right now it's ourselves, Roald Amundsen, who is an Arctic explorer and has this particular mission. He has the following dice with him that he can use in combat, more of that perhaps in a little while. Rekopagan, a native animal handler, who, as we can see, has a good reputation. His animal capacity, he has the capacity of an animal, and he is sexist against people of the opposite sex. And the game has lots of fun stuff like this. Well, fun depending how you look at it, where you might have a monk or a nun who is a sexist or a racist, but otherwise is kind of all good and all okay. We have a loyalty meter, and then we have the huskies, who kind of bring combat capacity in and crucially increase our inventory. So let's go ahead and let's go into the village and see, and we can kind of visit the main mechanic here. So it won't actually let me just click on it because the idea is we're not convinced there's a route there yet. So I'm going to go this way because I'm a little nervous that going north won't have the route. So they march on through, and yes, it is there. We can go there. and meet up with the quote-unquote natives. This is another dynamic that the students encountered very quickly in their playthroughs. It's one of the first things you do in every game that you play of the Curious Expedition. So you arrive at a native village. The group are apparently well armed and formidable warriors. They meet a native who introduces herself as Camus, who turns out to be the very person they're being asked to escort, and quite luckily for us, she immediately jumps on and says, sure, I'll come with you guys. So as you can see, we actually end up, she has become a shaman, so now we have her skills added to our party, and our standing, the little stat up here, has now gone up to 3. So we can do a few different things. We can try and recruit people, we can trade with local people, and there are various things. Food, generally speaking, puts you in a situation, helps you alleviate your sanity meter, and there's goods here such as jewels and native trinkets. So let's take one native trinket and give them, well, that's pretty expensive. We might need that chocolate later. Yeah, let's do it anyway. I'm so bad at this game, the chances of me surviving are not strong anyway, so let's see. So let's deal with that and get the trinket. And now we'll leave and move on. So the level will ostensibly end with the discovery of a golden temple, and something the game does a lot, where it kind of mashes up these various kind of ideas, various concepts of exploration, classic Aztec, Central American kind of ideas, even the Arctic exploration kind of expansion, which brings a lot of cool new things to the game, basically kind of engages in this kind of mishmashing of things. So she's shown us where there's a shrine recently. We'll go into the shrine. And again, so you see, it's maybe not shocking that my students immediately noticed when I showed them the clip from Raiders of the Lost Ark how the similarities that were here. We enter the shrine, and they generally have some kind of sense of, an altar illuminated with breathtaking ambience. And he asks here, is the treasure on the altar? We investigate, and the golden plate. So I'm going to take it to show us what happens. I tend to take it anyway, even though it's kind of bad news bears for my group. So we take all. We drop standing with the locals. They magically, in video game logic, know that this happened. But in particular, a drastic climate shift ravages the region, and we are responsible. And that's interesting, actually, because it's one of the few little nods that the game makes early on to this notion that explorers are changing the ecology of the places they're exploring. Let's go on to the next question mark now and see what's here. And this is a trader. Again, you get all these interesting things, We could not help but think that he was hiding something from us. There's a lot going on there with kind of, the inscrutability of the local, and the untrustworthiness of local merchants. And especially if you look at kind of global history and Europeans and Americans traveling further east. The whole reason, of course, Columbus went west was to avoid going through the Middle East. And even the imagery here, the way the trader is dressed, the little tent and everything, it's quite interesting. Oh, well, thank you very much, Joe Fonseca, for the very kind comments. I'm kind of working off chat and videos here simultaneously. So let's barter with this guy and see what he has. So he has a bunch of stuff. He has a machete, he has bullets, which will add combat dice if we need them. I'm going to avoid combat as much as I possibly can, because I'm kind of getting nervous about it. Might see if he'll take the trinket. He will. And take the chocolate back. So yeah, I know that puts me back exactly where I was. But now that I have the gold plate from the shrine, I feel a bit better. The merchant seemed anxious returning our possible return. So, okay, fair enough. Let's go and see if we can go down here. We'll eat some chocolate to increase our sanity. And let's see if we can go down here. As you can see, by the way, our trusty sidekick, our trusty animal handler, doesn't speak the same language as we do, or at least not the same language as the player. It doesn't seem to be necessary. He's talking away in his own language. I'm going to go ahead and promote him with the points that he's earned. And that kind of makes him slightly more useful to us now. It increases the capacity inventory, which is usually pretty important in the game. So already you see as it gets red there, that's a sign that everybody will start to go insane. So we're in a bit of trouble here already. We're just going to have to eat up all the chocolate. And it looks like already that I'm going to die pretty early in this game. Unless this happens to be the Golden Temple over here. And that's okay, honestly, because I'd kind of like to just kind of die and show you some of the basic mechanics of the game, and then share a little bit about how my students have used it before I go for the evening. So we made an unusual discovery. The remains of the decayed boat loomed in front of us. The HMS Beagle, how peculiar. Nice little inside joke there. You saw an animal tracks. I'm going to search the area anyway, spending an entire day to do it, and that allows us to get a treasure map and a shovel and all these interesting things. Dynamite can be used to blow passages through mountains. So now we're kind of officially in the area of the hyenas, and I'm not going to last long if I take on the hyenas. I'm going to see if I can make my way back up to the village here and possibly get some rest. There's basically no chance of that happening, which is a bummer. Just checking our little diary here. So I have a feeling that I'm going to die a miserable death in just a few minutes. So why don't we just go ahead and take on the hyenas? And we can kind of just show you guys a little bit what the combat mechanic is like. So it's a cool little kind of a dice rolling idea mechanic. And so you can set up little combos and it'll show you the combo you do or don't have. Amundsen is a shotgun. Let's use that to hit them. And then our pack animals will help us as well. And we can choose to take a kind of a defensive stance. Okay, there's not really anything there. I think we have one more roll. Taunt. Well, I suppose I'd rather lose a pack animal than a person. And we're at the end of the round. So it's actually not going badly, in large part because Amundsen has a shotgun. They don't always have shotguns. In fact, sometimes they have nothing at all. I have Joe. Joe is asking me if there's any resistance to my program to having video games in a course. Well, I must say there's been a lot of support from my colleagues, I'm very happy to say. I mean, it's great. Bob and I work together in History Respawn because we think alike, you know, we kind of support each other. I'm very, very happy to say that there's been a lot of support. It started with my intensive winter term class, which here at Centre is kind of designed to be experimental and to give people a chance to do different kinds of things. And so I had a lot of success with that, and so when I turned to my colleagues and said, listen, I want to incorporate this into my long term, particularly into this Gen Ed class, they were like, yeah, go for it. I mean, I don't think it hurt that I had gained a lot of traction with everybody at that time. You know, my first couple of years here have gone well. People feel comfortable. They've seen me teach. You know, for those of you who don't know, if you teach in college, generally speaking, you're being asked to... or you will be observed by colleagues where they will come and watch you teach. And so people have seen me teach. I think I kind of gained a bit of goodwill that way. And people felt comfortable that I was doing this with, you know, with the best intentions, I suppose. I will say, and I'll talk about this more in a second, kind of the nature of the assignment. It's not the largest stake assignment. I think perhaps there would be a slightly different vibe to it if I had made this like 50% of the grade, which I did not do. I'll talk about that just more in just a second. So we just discovered a butterfly, Amund's deceiving butterfly, but we've hit 0 in the Insanity Meter. So one of the companions in our group has basically taken off, and she screams in anguish as the tree presses down on her even harder. I don't actually have the dice to save her, and so I'm going to have to leave her alone, which is a bummer. And there we go. So we ended her suffering. Lots of these things start to happen. That seems to have been a bit of a fluke, not specifically tied to insanity, but we're going to see more insane things happen in the next few minutes. Aha! Blind luck, got to the temple and finished it. So this actually saved me because I was toast with the Insanity Meter being 0. And this is something that the students have really kind of latched onto a lot. So let me get through kind of this mission, and I'll reflect more. The next kind of round I'll play, I won't comment on the game so much, I'll comment more on what my students have been doing. So we entered the pyramid, and I knew that this name, Roald Amundsen, would go down in the annals of world history. And so it has this little kind of summing up, little score page. The next couple of pages are very interesting. Also, I got a speed bonus. That's not, I don't always get that. So you come back to this kind of imperial city in front of this large building, very kind of reminiscent of Paris or London, of the great imperial cities. And I was talking to my students about this. My wife and I were in Paris just over a year ago, and you literally, you know, you're stumbling over monuments to people who ran Morocco for 30 years and the like. You know, these old European cities have fantastic history tied in. So you're given these medals in this kind of end of Star Wars type celebration, but they actually have little mechanics and perks to the game. So Desert Explorer will give you reduced movement in the desert, Heavy Carrier is additional inventory, and Occult Vision reveals the locations of all stone circles and increases radius when analysing them. I'm going to go with Inventory because it's useful, and if I do survive the next level, that will be pretty good. So here we are back in this drawing room, and this is something I'm glad that I wanted to touch back on. My students and I talked about this today because I asked them directly, so what's this like? What's the screen like when you go back into civilization, as it were? And Roald Amundsen here is jumping into the lead. We're back with our friend here in the armchair, and he has on the central little plinth here, we have the various things we've brought back from our time abroad, and we have a couple of choices. We can sell them for money at auction, or we can donate them to the museum and instead acquire fame. I tend to donate them whenever I can to get that fame mechanic up. But, you know, my students and I talked about this, and in particular this kind of big drawing room, a classic gentleman's club. He's drinking port in front of the fireplace. I talked to them a little bit about gentlemanly capitalism and these kind of, which is an economic theory talking about what drives British capitalism, and if Bob was here he'd do a much better job than I in explaining that. But gentlemanly capitalism, a theory put forward by Hopkins and Kane, is very much about the economic goals that drove British imperialism, and in particular the people who drove those policies, specifically members of the elite, people who went to the right schools, that means Eton or Harrow, people who went to the right universities, that means Oxford or Cambridge. And these guys kind of run the world, as it were. Certainly they run these clubs. So I'm just going to gift everything and run the score up here in the fame. I'm going to keep the butterfly. I'm going to donate the butterfly and kind of leap into the lead. None of this will matter because I am sure to die instantly. So I'm really fond of this game. I'm really happy I chose to use it. I really like the vibe and the tenor to the game, and I kind of talked to my students about this. It's very cute, you know, it's extremely, it's kind of self-aware, it's tongue-in-cheek, and I think that works nicely with the theme and allows us to kind of get something of it. Of course, I forgot the woman who didn't make it was his wife, so we lose a little bit of a fame, we get a bit of a penalty. He's not happy, but sure, that's life. Here we have another one. Of course, we're being challenged to complete the forthcoming expedition within 80 days. That is, of course, a reference to Around the World in 80 Days, which itself shows, you know, this kind of familiarity and immersion in this kind of late 19th century, early 20th century kind of idea. So, here we have to recruit people. We have Torquil MacDonald, the soldier, James Stirling, the diplomat, Albert Ashfield, the cultist, and in fact, they all have good attack dice, actually. They all have the same dice, so I guess it's the... what's the word? It's the, come on, help me out here. It's the perks that are differing here. So he's a whiskey expert, which means he gains increased sanity drinking whiskey. I'm going to go with the diplomat for the increased prices, and sure, just, you know, to go out into the world with someone who knows what they're doing. Do I want to purchase equipment? I definitely want to purchase some food if I can. First aid kit is for wounds. Let's take the marbles as a good trading object. And we're going to sell the dynamite. Oh, they don't let us sell it, okay. So, we'll make that deal, and we're going to set sail. So, let me talk a little bit about the assignment. So, this is global history, and the main assignment, in fact, arguably the assignment for which global history is famous for at Centre College and also Intro-American history, is the research paper. So at the end of the term, they have to write a paper, or by the end of the term, they must have written a 15-page research paper based on the use of primary sources. And that's one of the few things that the historians have all agreed, this is what we will do. I'm locked into that, which is fine. I would be open to students possibly using video games as secondary sources for that paper, that is to say, talking about the way video games represented their topic, but that's something I would follow very much on a case-by-case basis. We're not in the Arctic, so I'm going to put the snowshoes and the tickets away for now and hang on to everything else. So I knew that was there. I also knew I wanted a couple of longer essays, like 5 to 7 page essays, and so the big thing really at the end of the day was how much do I want to give them a 6-page essay that's to do with video game topics, or do I want to use a shorter assignment? There's a couple of reasons I have to have these shorter assignments for the class, which I decided would be about 500 words or so. For American college students, 500 words basically means, 2 pages basically. The first short assignment was a primary source analysis, and the second short assignment is this game, which is they've been asked to play the game, and basically what they've been asked to do is take a game mechanic, whether it be the sanity meter, the standing mechanic you have with local people, the representation of quote-unquote natives, the fame mechanic when you return to the metropole, whatever it might be. Take one mechanic and then expand upon the kind of historical context of that mechanic. So here we are talking to the natives. So something that's come up a lot in class discussions has been this representation of natives and kind of talking with natives. And before spring break, we just got back from our spring break, I had the students play the game in groups in class. And you get to have some fun because you get to hear them debate what to do and what not to do, how to treat the local people and everything else. I'm going to trade in these marbles, give me a whole bunch of capital, for food, which I badly need. And I suppose we'll take the golden head if they'll give it to me. Okay, I don't mind giving them one dynamite. So here's there we go. This is a trade. So these are things I'll trade in for fame when I get back and get some food. And again, I'm not really super focused on doing well in this game. So that was all the students were asked to do. And so one of the reasons I chose to stick with the short assignment was I wanted it to be low stakes. I wanted this to be an assignment the students enjoyed and had some fun with. And so far I'm happy to say that's been happening. In our in-class playthroughs, I had one group that deliberately played it on the hardest difficulty level, and basically their ship caught fire, or at least they started a fire near their ship, and they had to sit there for 3 minutes and just watch it devour the game world, which they enjoyed, which I'm happy to say, but it gave it a lot of fun. Students have found it less intimidating. I have learned in my still young teaching career, this is my 6th year teaching classes entirely on my own, that it really helps when you're as clear as you can possibly be with assignments. And that's not necessarily because people are students or inexperienced undergraduates or what have you. That's because you're dealing with 30, 40, 100 people at a time. The clearer you can be with everybody, the better everybody is going to feel and the clearer it's going to be. And I kind of knew I wasn't going to give them much guidance beyond please take out a mechanic and talk about it. So in the prompt I gave them a couple of examples. I used fame as a mechanic, and I used interaction with the natives as a mechanic. But beyond that, they were kind of on their own. And so I felt better with it being 5% of their grade as opposed to 15 or 20% of the grade, because of course it's still important. But you'd be surprised. Everyone's different, of course, but a lot of students will react. They kind of take it on board as, okay, you're almost signaling to them, yes, this is important, but you have some leeway here to have some fun and to experiment a little bit. So, writing a 500-word mini essay, it can go longer if they want, that expands upon it. Here we have the tip of a pyramid almost completely enveloped by the sand, and if they go in yet again, we are almost being taunted to do something terrible and do something irresponsible, so of course that's exactly what I planned to do. Oh well, it's actually a fight with a mummy. I was hoping to defile this temple and get some money out of it. So the mummy is pretty formidable, so this could be the end of the game. Strong defense on 2 of the 3 humans. That could be. I think if I get 2 of those, I can run. So it makes a huge difference when you play the game if you pick somebody who has a way to actually fight. Started the game, when I picked Marie Curie and the like, it's not super helpful. You see how hard the mummy hits there. One thing also the students have all commented upon is how hard the game is. And that's definitely deliberate on the design side. But it's great to kind of, again, with it being a 5% assignment, you worry about students feeling extreme frustration if they're just struggling to kind of connect to the game. So the fact they could kind of die and play again and die and play again, I think it made it a lot easier by the fact that again, that the assignment wasn't worth so much in the grand scheme of things. And here we have a mummy, a mysterious mummy wrapped in linen. Of course, Egyptology was so important to the development of archaeology in the 19th century. So it's not even remotely surprising it makes an appearance in this game. So I'll be dying shortly, I think, as the Insanity Meter runs out. So some drafts I've already gotten. The assignment is due this Friday, and students have come to share drafts with me, and a couple of them are really great. One student is interested. She mentioned how disease is being used in the game, and she goes on to discuss disease more generally. There's a couple of people talking about this concept of trading with natives, and the Insanity Meter is particularly popular. We see it here down to 0 again, in the notion of to what extent this represents an assumption on the part of Western explorers that being away from civilization was naturally debilitating. Also the prospect of going native. This is a game where members of your party can desert you and go native and join local communities. Here we see that Rekobogan, the native animal handler who has been loyal to Amundsen since before the game even started, is now sitting on a crate, whispering to himself as he chews onto some meat. And then he understands, oh my god, he's actually murdered somebody else in the group. So again, this happens a lot. Cannibalism is common when you go insane. What tends to happen to me a lot is that my character comes across the body of someone in the group with a gun in your hand, and you've no idea how it happened. I particularly like that one. So here we are, the CSS Alabama, animal tracks. We're about to die, so I'm just going to muck around here. More dynamite and ropes. So again, much like the previous game, I didn't really plan ahead in terms of having food or anything else, so my only chance is to completely stumble across a golden temple. So why don't we just kind of walk in this direction and we'll get more kind of insanity effects. So as this game is wrapping to a close, I'm really thrilled that I went for it, and I'll be perfectly honest, what drew me to it the first time was the map. I just was so intrigued by this map dynamic of the uncovering of material, because a lot of what I wanted to cover in class was based on this idea of what does it mean to explore, you know? So in today's class, we were talking about Antarctica, and the huge difference between, for example, Cortez's exploration and really conquest of central Mexico versus exploration of Antarctica. Whereas in the 1500s, you have Spaniards going into Mexico, what we now know to be Mexico, of course. Speak of the devil, here we have Spanish-style Central American architecture with the friar standing in the front court, Brother John the missionary. There's a huge difference, for example, in Antarctica, where people like Amundsen and Scott and Shackleton were competing with each other to reach the South Pole and to traverse the continent, but there's nothing in their way. It's just ecology, right? It's just the environment. It's killer whales and other things like that, which of course is enormously different from what happens with the Spanish, for example, in central Mexico, where yes, many people die because of horrible diseases that rip through Central America brought over by Europeans, but of course there's a huge amount of displacement by the Europeans after that. So Joe is actually a great question to kind of follow on from what I said a little bit earlier, but that I haven't really clarified. And Joe Fonseca on the chat is asking specifically about, okay, was there an issue with literacy in games? Did people feel uncomfortable, that they didn't play a lot of games? The quick answer is, yeah, a lot of my students really, a bunch of them didn't really play games. And I think sometimes you have this you have pretty good students, honestly, who are intimidated and concerned that they can't that they won't be able to complete the assignment. So the game definitely isn't easy, but I will say it was a huge boost, and I was so grateful to the developers for giving me free keys. But it was also a huge boost that I was very clear in class: you'll die a lot, I die a lot, watch. We played the game together and they saw how quickly I died, and I really made the case, I want you to explore, and experience the game. And I think beyond that, it really helped that there's a lot of stuff happens in the game very, very quickly. He wants a donation. Okay, so we'll give him climbing gear. And maybe he'll give us some more cans. So, so you had students who were concerned, and you just basically put their mind at ease as best you can. But like I said, the fact that you almost immediately encountered, quote unquote natives, that the insane meter gives you lots of stuff to chew on. That wasn't an intended pun, but I'll go with it anyway. All these kinds of things, I felt the students had lots of content to muck around with, and I think that made a big difference. And to go back to Joe's question more broadly, I am constantly interested and quite surprised, honestly, by how frequently I have students in my video game class in the intensive winter term who just don't play games. And it's always surprising to me because I kind of think they'll self-select, but I'm happy to say that they tend to have a lot of fun with it. It helps, to be honest, that games are so ubiquitous now. It's pretty common. If I put them into a group of 5 people, for example, to work together in the classroom, one of those 5 is pretty good with games. I think it also helps, and this was brought up in class today, the retro design of the game. It makes the game feel accessible to people. It's not a super complex game. You just kind of, you point the mouse and you click. If, for example, I'd given them like a 2D platformer, a Metroidvania type, I think that might have actually been more intimidating. So here we are. I can reveal camp points, I can reveal ruins, I can reveal caves. Let's reveal ruins at this magic circle. So we're done for. The question, I suppose, here is, do I stick or twist, in the sense of, do I try and get all the way down here in the hope that maybe the temple is down there? Let's do that, because then a grisly end is always fun. You've already seen London, so why go back there? Jacobagan, who we know has gone insane, is speaking away. He's an infected wound. He's now a cannibal. Maybe you have to watch out for him. Funny how he went for the English guy ahead of the dogs, but I suppose that's a whole other discussion. So we're gently trickling in our sanity here. Nice little British Museum stamp from the uncovering of the ruins. Let's go ahead. And we're going to use this canned food as much as we can. And then this will all come to a grisly end. So that's it. That's kind of my update of the game. As I've already said, it has gone well. It's definitely encouraging to do more of this in the future. I think that for the next game I do like this, I'd love to. I think I'll revisit this particular game in my intensive term, but there's no question that the kind of graphic art design and the overall, the game itself is difficult to play. It's difficult to succeed in the game, but it's easy to actually play it, as in clicking your mouse on things. The fact that there's a browser version was a huge benefit that honestly I kind of underestimated, hadn't thought about. That people can play on their on tablets and things like that, and play on laptops. That's been really cool. So it's been great. It's been a great fit, and maybe in future classes I will play. I'll bring in more games, classes that aren't specifically video game history classes. So unfortunately, poor Roald here is really beginning to struggle. We have a native offering their help, which means they have red berries and a native animal handler. And so my best attempt to sabotage my own mission here, my guy just keeps surviving. Let's just keep going down south. Let's see what else is there. Impassable region, okay. We'll go back to the shrine again. So yeah, I think we'll leave it at that. I thought they were going to go to some kind of a grisly end, but doesn't seem to be doing that. Let's just take lots of stuff from a local religious site and see how things go badly. So we've flooded the surrounding area. We've very much got bad karma, I suppose. Something we talked about in class as well a lot. The game makes a lot of hay of this kind of bad juju kind of idea of creating game mechanic reasons for bad things to happen to you, right? Basically. And it's worked out well. And again, looking today at Indiana Jones and other kinds of examples of famous explorers, it is something that crops up again in our popular memory of how these things work. There's the Golden Temple again. Well, I think I should live stream all my games of the Curious Expedition, because this is, despite talking and not playing very well at all, I have completely gotten away with it. So we get to end this on a high. We go back to London as heroes. I'm kind of assuming it's London. It's random, it's random imperial city. We go back to our friend here in the study. So that's it. I'll leave you guys with it that way. Please do, if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, think about upping with us. You can find us at history.com/historyrespawned. You can find us on Twitter at historyrespawn. You can find Bob, the founder of History Respawned, at Whitaker Almanac. I am Prof. John Harney. This is all on Twitter. We have a podcast on SoundCloud. It's also available on iTunes. If you just search for us, you will find us. And of course, there's all this information and more at historyrespawned.com, including links to our Patreon page if you'd like to support us and help us buy games and software and pay for hosting and all that fun stuff. I hope you've enjoyed the stream. Thank you very much to those who asked questions. Thank you, Joe. It was a pleasure to answer your questions. And feel free to look me and look the rest of us up. As I donate lots of things to the museum now, I look forward to seeing everybody else very soon. Take care and goodbye.